And good evening, and welcome back. Hope that you enjoyed yet again another great time of fellowship in our luncheon this afternoon. If you were unable to be with us this time, we invite you back for the next one for next month. Kind of usually that third week of the month, and unless there's some kind of confliction, sometimes those move. So be checking your bulletin. Also a great opportunity to have our send-off for Jeanette and Terry today as well. The other day I heard in conversation the comparison of us, that's you, me, mankind, compared to sheep. Now, that's not a big compliment when you think about it. Really, it's not. It's not really something that you look forward to be sheep, but nonetheless, the comparison that we're sometimes stuck with from the Bible's perspective, identified with that. And really, why is that based on what? What is it? What we act, how we act, what kind of decisions we make, what kind of predicaments that we can find ourselves in, show that we are indeed compared to sheep. Over in Isaiah 53:6, it says, "All of us, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, but the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on him." In Ezekiel 34:31, God says that you are my sheep and I am your shepherd. That's God telling he and his people, that relationship. And then John 10:14, Jesus speaks of us being his sheep and then he being the shepherd. But it's still really kind of funny in some ways to be called sheep. When you think about it, that we think we're more educated than that, we're smarter than that. We are certainly not, when you really start to break it down, that we are not sheep. Because as we study sheep, they are not the smartest animal in the barnyard. And there are other times that we can also see, because of how crazy things can get, that mankind can come up with all kinds of decisions that are made, and that kind of leaves us scratching our heads, and then really can say, well, that maybe I can see why now. Based on what they've done. Based on maybe what I have done. Sometimes we get the old saying that goes, we don't have sense enough to come out of the rain. Sometimes that is used. Sheep, by the way, are also in need of a shepherd. That's why God said it, and then he related himself as Christ in his ministry, that he was the shepherd. But sheep need that guidance and need a shepherd, really, for their own sake. And here's that passage from Isaiah that I first quoted to you, says that, by the way, all of us, not some of us, not the smart ones separated from the ones that don't have it all together, the ones that have figured it out. It says, but all of us, like sheep, have gone astray. And each of us have turned to what? To his ways, to his path? No, to his own way. It kind of puts us all in the same familiar boat. We're all in the same path. We have all done this in the times of our lives. It's really pointed out for us to see the need for him. Now, granted, not all will come to him or even see the need for him. And again, that's more on the sheep logic, because they just don't understand. I and you and we all can wander and venture out. And why it's so dangerous? Because even in a sheep standpoint, as far as the animal kingdom, when they get alone and scared, they're not smart enough to keep quiet. They bleed out. They cry out, kind of a help me, and they're isolated and alone, which tells a predator, it tells a wolf, it's dinner time. You can go, for those of you who have ever rabbit hunted, you could get a rabbit in distress call. You're going to get a coyote immediately to respond to it, because when a rabbit is caught up in a snare, it does the same thing. It just cries out with this pierce-sounding cry of distress, which tells the predator or the enemy it's dinner time, and so they come running. This is not a new phenomenon. Why God said it in the Old Testament, and then Jesus referred to it again in his ministry, telling those around, I am here. I have come. This lead up that God being the shepherd and you being the sheep, Jesus says that I am that shepherd. I think one of the biggest reasons why we are identified with sheep is that with all the foreknowledge and warnings that God has given us, and act upon that, to give us his word, we still go off and do our own thing. God often describes it to us as really flat out rebellion. That's why sin and rebellion kind of go in hand a lot of times. Yes, we can mess up and we can have a sin in our lives, but when we perpetuate it, it's flat out rebellion that I will not. I will do as I please, even while fully knowing where it may lead and what will happen. We still don't care. Now that is interesting, because whether it boils down to, well, it just feels good, or I like to, whatever the case may be, and you can say, well, why don't you? You know what it will lead to. Yeah, I know that. I know this where will lead. I know this where will take me, but still, and there's always a but with it. Many choose to keep doing it. How many times have you heard, well, I know this is bad for me, but I know really I shouldn't be doing this, but I like it. I like it so much. I don't know why. Logically, it doesn't even make sense to me. They may even admit to themselves. Or even the last, I just can't help myself. Paul puts it in to describe our two natures, and really why I like to turn over there often. It's found in Romans 7, if you want to turn there. Romans 7, starting with verse 15. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of flesh, sold into bondage to sin. For what I am doing, I do not understand. For I am not practicing what I would like to do, but I am doing the very thing I hate. You say a lot of us have found ourselves in that situation? Sure. Paul, I'm glad that he penned this the way he did, so then I can relate to it. But if I do the very thing that I do want to do, I agree with the law, which only states the law was right after all. This is the consequences. I should have listened, yet indeed I am a sinner. I am outside of God's will. But why? Verse 18, for I know nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. Isn't that interesting? A lot of times that's why we say it's based on intentions. Don't judge me. Don't judge my heart. I really want to. I intended to. I would really like, and they're right. The things that Paul states, that there is deep down in me this desire to do good, but then I find that I am not. Verse 19, for the good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. But if I'm doing the very thing I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. Now there is the why. It's sin in my life, continual, perpetuating, I will do this, I will keep doing that, and that sin eventually takes over. That becomes our master. Now, I can't stand justified in the end with that knowledge and saying that the law was right and it was sin, and then eventually say, well, the devil made me do it. See, because a lot of times we just say, well, see, it's the sin that dwells in me that's doing that. See, and there was a religious sect that actually believed that once you're sanctified and that you are saved, that you are in good standing with the Lord no matter what you do, because what you're doing is sin. It's separated. You're saved over here, but all of what you're doing, acting out on stuff like that, and the two really don't mesh. They don't go together. That's not what that's saying. But sin is very powerful, and that's what we've got to take notice to. Very powerful. Never, never, ever let's forget that. It becomes so many people's master. And here is the reminder us that we all become powerless. That's us. We over sin. Not Christ, who is victorious over sin, but you and I. And through him, we can conquer and have forgiveness of sins and be cleansed from all unrighteousness if we are walking according to his ways. That's the if that's in there. If you're walking in the light as he is in the light, then you will get continued cleansingness. We can be freed from the bondage that is the overtaking, the slavery of sin. But it's only by looking to him over and over for every circumstance, instead of neglecting the idea, saying, I got this. I can handle this. Now let's finish his thought here in this text, verse 21. I find then that the principle that evil is present in me, the one who wants to do good. Now, I want to stop there because it's hard to admit the first part if we think that we are also good all of the time. For Paul to write that, I find then the principle that evil is present in me. How many would raise their hand and say, oh yeah, right now I think that there is evil. Evil is present in me, in my life. To admit that evil is present in me, even today, we all have it. You have it. I have it in me to do evil. You do as well. And there is also a part of you that wants to do good. It goes back to the intentions. We want to. It's always about the acting out of faith, the acting out of our Christian lives. Verse 22, for I joyfully concur with the law of God in the inner man. But I see a different law in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin, which is in my members. I will admit that there have been times in my life that I felt that I just don't care. I just want this, and I want this for me. And I know deep down it's not right. See, Paul was saying the same thing. And such an admission as Paul says here about a war, waging a war against God's law. And where is it found? He says, in my actions. Now back to being in my mind, my thoughts. No wonder Paul says to capture every thought and make it obedient to Christ. I've challenged myself this past week after preaching that to be able to try to do that. It's a little bit harder than you think, because there's so many thoughts that come in and out of your mind. Now, if the reference is to capture every thought and then make it obedience to Christ. Now, that's going to be the challenge, because a lot of my thoughts are not going to be obedient to Christ. A lot of my thoughts are not going to be the best intended. But see, we think so innocently, like the Jews said, as long as I think it, I'm okay. I can think whatever I want. That's a lie. That's why Jesus talked the intent. Out of the heart is what defiles a man. It's all of where it starts, is what you start feeding your mind. And so as the Jew came up and says, well, adultery is only when you have this action. He goes, no, it's not. He said it actually starts way before that. It starts within your heart. If you've lusted upon a woman, then you have committed adultery in your heart. Couldn't wrap their arms around that concept. I mean, the same thing about murder. Well, the murderers are the ones that pull out the knives and the guns and the rocks. And these are the people, these are the murderers. If you hate your brother, you're a murderer. See, we can't have those entertained thoughts within the war in my mind making me who wants to do good. But instead, here he says, becomes a prisoner of the law of sin, which is in my members. That's the acting out part with our words, with our actions. But we can sometimes be in a disadvantage because most of us do not understand what it means to be a prisoner. I mentioned this a little bit in class. I said that I'd be bringing this out in the message. When you're a prisoner, you think about that, where you can't make decisions for yourself about anything. You are not in control. That's why you're a prisoner. That's why we have a prison. And they're told what to do and how to do it. In all the times I was visiting Jesse this past year, and I've related stories about him, as I saw him being led up for visitation on a weekly basis in shackles. And they did try hiding it from me behind the door so they didn't embarrass him. But nonetheless, I did saw what kind of prison life is. Just kind of a mere back, just open the door just a bit. Being told what to do and when to do it. See, that is a total prisoner. And for most of us, we will never really understand that, because we didn't live that lifestyle. We don't understand. I didn't know until recently that he had to eat breakfast, for example, like 4:30 in the morning. I'm not an early riser. I like to sleep in a little bit longer than that. Maybe you get up and have your breakfast at 4:30, but I can't do that. But he had to. There was no choice. Well, I may not feel like eating breakfast then. Well, then you don't eat. You see how you're a slave to the system as far as how they have it for you? I remember out of the movie in Shawshank Redemption, if some of you have seen that movie, when Morgan Freeman's character was released, he said that he couldn't even go to the bathroom without asking for permission, because that's all his life was accustomed to having to ask, can I go to the bathroom? Can I go to the restroom in a break during their work schedule? He could not even start without asking for permission. Now, that is the way of life in prison, and there's so much more that could be told of that. They couldn't do anything And the same goes for us when we are truly a prisoner. When he concludes in this text that I had you turn to in verse 24, he says, "Wretched man that I am, who will set me free from the body of this death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then on the one hand, I myself with my mind am serving the law of God, but on the other hand with my flesh, the law of sin." He doesn't expound on it, but gives the only answer found in verse 25. Thanks be to God through, now that's the mechanism, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. In my Bible, it's exclamation point. That is the mechanism of how we are freed from this. He is being able to go to him and seeing really in all overall of what really what's truly important. And it gets us to take a little step back to ask us, who is on the throne of our lives? Because you can know all of these facts all day long and still choose to take another path and reject the idea that I am in bondage to nothing. I am completely in control. How about when we further read the passage that says that we can inherit the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? What will man give in exchange for it? Now, see, that's an interesting question as well, and tries to grab our attention so that we can try to get out of the wrapped up world that we're in and refocus. And it starts with how you value a soul. What is one worth? How about your soul? And in place of what? If you devalue something, you don't put a lot on it, see? And we see the values of all, and knowledge is the key too. You can go into a garage sale, and let's say someone doesn't have the knowledge that they've emptied out a house of grandma and grandpa's, and they put something out for sale, and they devalued it. They didn't see any value in it. It was marked $2. Maybe that's something that you've been waiting for. You've looked for, you've been on the internet. You know it's worth $500. See how the valued system is based on someone that didn't have the knowledge of it, didn't really respect it, didn't like it. Maybe it was just grandma's old heirloom, and we're just going to put it up for sale, and you can have it for $2. It may be priceless. See, of knowing really what a value of a soul is. What is one worth? And what will you exchange or trade for it? Most of us really don't understand the true value of a soul because we've not crossed over to the other side to really see it. See, that's always hindsight. Hindsight is 20/20. If I would have known then. See, that comparison is given to us just briefly. It says that if your eye offends thee, pluck it out. Oh, I wouldn't want to do that because I value my eyesight. And I do too. I wouldn't want to go blind. But in hindsight, in the back end of it, it is so much better to enter into a kingdom of heaven blind than go into fully torment, fully sighted. If your hand offends thee, cut it off. Well, no, I need my hand. I want to have two. Sure. That's obvious. Everybody understands that. But see, you don't know the value system of it yet. And why hell will be such a torment because of all of the, can I just do it over again? How foolish I was, how stubborn I was, how come I didn't pay more attention to it? And you really didn't see it. Maybe you didn't stare death in the face long enough. I know I can maybe not speak for Weldon, but I know being in this position, you see it often. You see it coming. It's something that we all don't like. And you kind of stare it down in the face because you kind of see the inevitable. You kind of see what's translated in the Bible, that it's appointed for man to die and then the judgment. And the older we get, the more of it we see. The older we get, the more we research the obituaries to see if there's someone that we know, someone that we may have crossed paths with. I said it before, but people, for the most part, especially with any kind of doubt, don't usually look death in the face. In just the short funerals that I have been at and seen and done and performed, standing at the back when they open it up and people trail out, I can't tell you the percent. There is more the percentage of people that will not look inside that coffin than the people that do, for their own reasons. They feel very uncomfortable. I know that I felt very uncomfortable about seeing a dead person when I was very young. I was very traumatized by it. I think I was taken young, and it haunted me, and I couldn't sleep at night, and I had nightmares. I didn't know if I would ever overcome that. That was a great fear of mine. Don't know really where it came from. It just, I didn't like it. I didn't feel comfortable with it. There was something scary about it. They were motionless. There was no life in them, and I struggled with that for years. But then with the reality of a Christian and being in a Christian state and knowing what the end of it all will be and not fooling myself and being able to understand that and then knowing my value and value to God, that helps me go. No one wants to die for sure, but die we shall. And out of this shell that has been holding our souls for the length of time that we've been put on earth. And even these days, how we devalue life so much in this world, which really can send the message to people that they're worthless. That's why suicide rates are on the rise. They feel there's nowhere else. They feel it's hopeless. And they feel worthless. And they don't think that they have any value. And maybe someone can save them and rescue them and tell them how much value that they really are. Where did they hear that they had no value? It didn't come from God. Your value is so much more than the world. Because that's what the comparison is. If you were to inherit the whole world and lose your soul, we devalue life so much. And I've said this before, but it really is the world that we live in today, from the start of life to the end of life. We throw away almost anything if you don't have value in it. And it doesn't inconvenience my life right now. Why abortion started out to be so popular, eventually using it as modern-day form of birth control. They missed it. Someone that says that, oh, I am too young to have children, but adult enough to have sex. See, and not knowing that consummating that together could produce this, like that is some kind of surprise. Well, that's just not going to fit my lifestyle right now, and here's an avenue. In fact, that line gets grayer and grayer. You know how disgusted we see that when you see the images and pictures of how late an abortion can happen, when you see it's fully a child. You can recognize it as a baby. No, we don't want to call it that. The government says, well, we can't do it. We want to call that a fetus. Why? Because it'll make you feel better. Because if we said that was a life and you were terminating a life, but yet you get in an accident with someone that was pregnant, it is skewed how we are. You could kill that woman with that unborn baby, and you're up for 2 murders because she may have not wanted that child to die. See, now we're calling it a child. Well, I thought just a minute ago we called it a fetus, and it was disposable. Which one is it? See, our skewed value system doesn't come up with one when we do it out of personal gain. Any consequences for my actions, just is what I want, but not preparing for the outcome of procreation. And I don't want a child right now. And it's so easily just to cast aside. It's worthless to be thrown out. And because of what? Because of true selfishness. That will cramp my style. It will slow me down. So life becomes nothing. Nothing again seen in modern video games and kids high five as they go about slaughtering anyone and everyone, and why some take care of their own life later because it's so devalued. I really can't relate because sure, I have played cowboys and Indians as a child, and maybe you did too, and played war. But I didn't play anything like a video game that's called Grand Theft Auto, where I can kill innocent people, women and children, and laugh that off as entertainment. The Bible says you are what you think. I didn't say that. The Bible says that. Can I then call you a murderer? And if you think just having those thoughts don't make you a bad person, then tell me why Jesus says if you hate your brother, you will be guilty of murder. And if that's nothing and all fun and games, then our thinking really is truly skewed. We are not taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. There is no wonder we are seeing young people act out and do the things they do becoming more and more prevalent in our day and age. By our accepting all of that is not hurting anyone. It's just another form of entertainment. And the evil of the heart and the greed that takes over in a young man's mind from Marlow, a town less than 30 minutes from here, murdering his mother and his father and his sister so he could be the only beneficiary of the insurance money. Money. All because Dad was going to cut down on some of his spending. He couldn't live like that. He couldn't live without the lifestyle that he had gained. He's now up on credit card charges. Do you see how far can a young man get so far off base? It doesn't take much. Now all lives are lost, and he will never taste freedom again. All innocent, right? How many follow-up stories about a kid gone wrong, followed up by those neighbors and those who saw and knew him, said that they never saw it coming. Well, they were quiet. They didn't really say much. Say, we are all enslaved to what captures our attention. And that's the whole brunt of what this is. And what will really take control. And that may take our eyes off the big picture at times, knowing that our soul is eternal and that one that never dies, never ceases to exist. But this life, my health, my things, all that is found while I'm on earth will all pass away. And that fact to you is nothing new either. I've given you no revelation, no new revelation to that. We see people die and leave this earth every day. And we can see that they take nothing with them. We can stare death right in the face with all the facts and say, it still doesn't make a difference. This means more to me than what? How does that line finish? It's pretty scary. This means more to me than anything in the world. You've heard people say that. It's a scary statement because the world doesn't really equal to my soul to that kind of balance. But yet we'll exchange it for something far less. We often do. How about your soul, which goes way beyond this world? That's the bottom line. What will I give in exchange for it if you're going to give it up? If you're going to give it up over something, it better be something good. And we all think it is. And that's why it's the deceitfulness of riches. It's the deceitfulness of sin. It's deceit. It's a mirage. We're going to get there and it's going to be empty. You're going to say there is much water out in this desert, and you're going to go there and it's going to be sand. And that's why it's so deceiving. When all the world ends up, where it will be tallied up, is it going to surprise us? It shouldn't. Scripture points out. So Peter says it best. So if you already know that the world's all going to be burned up and this is all really doesn't matter, how shall you be found when he comes? That's really what matters. If we can be an encouragement to you, that's why we offer an invitation that we can pray with you and for you. Maybe something else has captured your attention and you're concerned for it, and well, you should. Because the soul is in the balance, and it's so important. And we only, the pundits that say that you only get one shot in this life, that's part of it's true. And then they say, well, go out and get all that you can for it. That's the lie part of it. But this is only one chance, only one life. And today is the day of salvation. If we can be of any help to you to pray with you and for you on any subject that is laying heavy on your heart, or maybe you've never obeyed the gospel and would like to have an opportunity to respond to the invitation. Whatever it is, if you'll make it known as we stand and as we sing.